Let's do this. We are live here on Talk America Live, and we are also live on our YouTube channel at JiggyJaguar.com. We have got a great guest with us today. We've also got our good friend Dan Perkins filling in for the great Don Mazzella today. Don is somewhere. I don't know where Don is, but he's not here. So we are going to do a pretty cool little television, audio, radio thing here today with a great guest. Steve, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, because I know me and Dan are definitely going to be interested in talking with you.
Okay. Well, I was born in Pasadena, California, home of the Rose Bowl. Went to UCLA. And had a 40-year career in sales and sales management. I worked for a company called Vision Service Plan, VSP, for the last 36 years. It provides vision care as an employee benefit that corporations offer their employees to cover eye exams, glasses, contact lenses. And I retired from there in 2009. And that's when I had time to really delve into my dad's war history in more detail. I knew the basics growing up, but they had kept a lot of material from the war years. I just wanted to go through that and organize it. And at that time, I had no intention of writing a book. But 4.5 years later, I did write a book, and it came out, and it's changed my life ever since.
Now, Steve Snyder joins us today. He is pretty amazing. He is a historian, author, and he's an expert on the 8th Air Force and an air war over Europe during World War II. And, of course, Dan Perkins joins us today. He, of course, is a best-selling author, great historian as well, and he has a great nonprofit called Songs and Stories for Soldiers. And Steve's book, Shot Down, is a true story about brave individuals, featuring Steve's own father, pilot Howard Snyder, and the crew of the B-17 bomber plane, Susan Ruth. It is set within the compelling events of the greatest conflict in world history. So tell us about Shot Down, Steve. This has got a 5-star reader review on Amazon, has received 25 book awards. It's being sold in gift stores at major air museums across the country, the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, the LA National Museum of the U.S. Air Force in Dayton, and the Ohio National Museum of the 8th Air Force in Pooler, Georgia, the OH. Tell us about Shot Down, my friend.
Okay, it's about my dad and his B-17 crew. They were shot down over occupied Belgium on February 8th of 1944. And the book goes into detail about what happened to each member of the crew and about all the Belgian people that risked their lives trying to help them. 5 of the crew made it back home, but 5 of them did not. And it's not just about my dad, but it follows each member of the crew, because something different happened to each guy. The first half of the book kind of builds up to the day that the plane was shot down, and then the rest of the book is all about what happened on the ground afterwards. After my dad bailed out, he was missing in action for 7 months, but he evaded capture. He was hidden by Belgian people for a while. Then he got tired, and he joined the French resistance and started sabotaging German convoys. So he had quite the experience. Now, and when Pat's Third Army came up through France after D-Day, he met up with them and got back to England.
Now, Dan, you currently work with all sorts of different folks with your Songs for Stories for Soldiers. What do you make of this situation? I think we may have lost Dan there. We're going to see if we can get everybody back in here and see what happens here. Get a hold of us online, jiggyjaguar.us. You can stream the show live, 24/7 replay, exclusive news, programming information, and there we are. Okay, let me get Steve back in here, and we'll keep going. Having some technical difficulties here with Skype as always, because Skype is always so much fun. We're talking with Steve Snyder today. Shot Down, the true story of pilot Howard Snyder and the crew of the B-17 Susan Ruth. And, of course, Shot Down is set within the framework of World War II in Europe and recounts the dramatic experiences of each member of the 10-man B-17 bomber crew. after the plane piloted by Steve's father was knocked out of the sky by German fighters over the French and Belgian border on February 8th, 1944. Now, Dan, you work with a lot of folks through your Songs for Stories for Soldiers organization. I know you've probably got some questions here with Steve about Shot Down.
Well, I'm first of all, it's a pleasure to meet you, and thank you for writing the story. I have been fortunate enough in my foundation to be able to meet with a lot of surviving World War II veterans. Some of them are in phenomenal health, and some of them are in terrible health. But what possessed you to write the story?
Well, after I retired, I started going through the material that my parents had kept, and there were two items that were really significant. One was a diary that my dad wrote while he was missing in action about his plane being shot down, and it was is absolutely riveting. It's in the book. And the other were all the letters that my mother had kept that my father had written to her during the war. And reading those letters were fascinating. He was very candid in what he wrote in the letters. He talked about what bombing missions were like, what life was like on the air base, what life was like in London and England at the time, escapades of him and his crew. And I just became fascinated with the story. It became my passion. I started reading book after book about the air war over Europe, went on the internet, spent countless hours doing research, downloading declassified military documents, joined a number of World War II organizations, started going to reunions, listening to veterans tell their stories. And after 3 years into it, I just came to the conclusion that the story of my dad and his crew was so unique and so compelling that people needed to know about it. So I decided to write a book.
So how much time did you have to spend with your father?
He died in 2007 at the age of 91. So quite a long time.
But in 2007, you weren't into the book. That was still 12 years away.
Well, 2012 when I decided to write the book. So it was 5 years after he died that I decided to write the book.
Was his departure, his death, part of the motivation to write the book?
No, I don't think so. No.
What was the most startling thing you learned about your father that you didn't know before you started to write this book?
Well, I don't know if it's the most startling thing, but I think just the appreciation of the fact that when he was being hidden by the Belgian people, he could have remained hidden, just hunkered down and waited for the U.S. armies to come up through France after D-Day and then to be liberated. But he decided to get back in the fight and, risk his life, not only fighting against the Germans, but if they had captured him when he was with the French resistance, they would have shot him right on the spot. So I don't know if too many people, or I don't know if I would have risked my neck to do that, to get back into the fight like he did. That had to take a lot of courage and a lot of bravery, and I don't think I really appreciated that fact until I really started researching and writing the book.
Do you think that's a very interesting observation? Do you think it's possible that if we go back in time and we think about Tom Brokaw's book, The Greatest Generation, and the sacrifices that these men and women made prior to the war and during the war, that there was probably a lot more of those kind of heroic events taking place than we were ever aware of?
Oh, absolutely. Without a doubt, at least in my estimation, they were definitely the greatest generation. They really had courage, backbone. I mean, they had a strong moral character, work ethic, dedication. They looked at it, they had a job to do, and they went and did it. So
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I guess I'm going to have to. How does our generation stack up against them in the traits that you just articulated?
Well, it depends on what you mean by our generation. I think the baby boomers, the children of the greatest generation, I think a lot of their character, morals and ethics, has been adopted by us. Now, the further you get away, Generation X, millennials, all that, I think that lessens and lessens and lessens on an overall basis.
So, do you think that we have lost as a country a sense of duty, honor, and country?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How do we ever get it back? Or will we?
That's a wonderful and puzzling question. Whether we will or not, it's hard to say. As you alluded to, that generation, they grew up in the Depression. They knew hard times. Today, history really isn't taught much in school, particularly World War II. The memory of World War II is fading. It seems like the younger generations are more interested in, things of the present, like video games and Star Wars and the Avengers and stuff like that, and just don't have that love of history and learning like we did. My parents made me read books, and I don't know, kids today, I don't think they even read, again, I'm talking in generalities, really read books, just like newspapers, who knew, they don't read newspapers. Everything's on their phone.
So we, Jim and I have a friend that's usually on with me on Tuesdays from the Middle East, and he has been screaming at his top of his lungs for as long as I've known him.
Yes.
He says that what America needs is a draft. We need to have everybody serve in the military. We need to get that order and discipline and structure back into our people and back into our country.
I agree 100%. I think everyone should serve for a year or two, in the military. If they don't, I guess you could have an alternative to do some type of service work. But, I was in the military. I went through basic training and all that. And at the time, I didn't want to do it, and it was I didn't like it. But it was really good for me. And when I look back, I'm glad I went through it, because it does teach, character, it teaches discipline, it teaches teamwork. And I think it makes people grow up and get get a grip on reality.
I agree. I was in the infantry as a soldier. I wasn't an officer, and I ran a brigade communications structure. But I look back at my life, and I say to people, long before I got involved with veterans, I've said to people, I think the only person that I was ever as close to as the young men that I went through basic training with at Fort Knox, Kentucky, is my wife. I can still remember those experiences. I can see them vividly. I can see the faces of the young men that went through training with me. Often wondered, what happened to them? Did they go to Vietnam? Did they go to Germany or Japan, or where did they go? And but I remember that experience, and I agree with you. You learn to order and discipline and structure. There's another thing that a lot of people don't understand about the military, especially the military today. Military does a tremendous job of educating people who come into the service with not the greatest education, and they train them into an MOS, a job specialty, but they give them the opportunity to advance their education, even going to college. And so the military, in my opinion, is doing things that are not being done in the public sector for a small number of American young people. But I think if we had mandatory service, peacetime or war doesn't make any difference. I think you're right about order, structure, discipline, teamwork. All of those things would help us better understand what a wonderful country we have and why we have to defend it.
Right, it gives you a much better appreciation for your country. I also went through basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. We have got a great guest with us today. Steve Snyder joins us. Shot Down, the true story of pilot Howard Snyder and the crew of the B-17 Susan Ruth. Now, something that I want you to give us your thoughts and everything on, Steve, which is a unique part of Shot Down, is you spoke with this gentleman, and I know I'm going to butcher his name, but Hans... I know I'm going to butcher that name. Hans Berger? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Hans Berger.
Tell us about Hans Berger, because Dan and I know Dan's going to be fascinated by this. When I had you on the other show, I was just amazed by this. But to tell us the story about Hans.
Okay. Well, all my dad knew, and all the military's record, the only thing the military records show was that my dad's B-17, it was named the Susan Ruth after my oldest sister, who was 1 year old at the time that he went overseas. His bomber was shot down by two Focke-Wulf German fighters. And that's all I knew. But one day when I was doing my research, my wife casually said, well, why don't you try to find the German pilot that shot down your dad's plane, which I thought it was a ridiculous idea. You know, she didn't know what she's talking about. You know, he probably died during the war. It's 70 years later. You know, he might have passed away by then. I can't speak German. You know, and everything entered my mind to try to find him. But like a good husband, I did what she told me to do, and I found Hans Berger. And fortunately for me, he became a translator after the war and speaks perfect English. And he gave me some wonderful insight that's in the book about what it was like to go up against the 8th Air Force. And furthermore, I found out that the gunners on my dad's plane shot Hans Berger down. They shot each other down. Hans bailed out and made it through the war. And I interviewed for the book. I interviewed him through email and over the telephone. But in 2016, I went to Munich, Germany, where he lives. He's still alive. He's 95 years old now. And I met with him personally and filmed an interview with him, and we've become friends. So that was an amazing experience.
Well, I can tell you, I can't match that, but I can tell you that our foundation, Songs and Stories for Soldiers, we have a relationship with Fort Stewart in Savannah, Georgia. And Fort Stewart is the largest infantry army base east of the Mississippi in terms of not only personnel, but square miles. It's an enormous place. And at Fort Stewart, they have a warrior in transition unit. This is where soldiers have come back from combat, have tried to be discharged, but have been unable to readjust to civilian life. So they bring them back in a military setting and give them extra health care and mental health care. And we put in our Songs and Stories for Soldiers program to help those 285 soldiers that are trying to transition back to civilian life. And it so happened that a 4-star Air Force general served in the 8th Air Force in World War II. And down the road from Fort Stewart is the 8th Air Force Museum.
I'm well aware with it.
And I had the opportunity with the gentleman who was the president of the foundation, who was very much involved at Fort Stewart, but president of the 8th Air Force Foundation, took me on a personal tour for probably 4 or 5 hours through the 8th Air Force Museum. What an amazing group of men and women in the 8th Air Force.
Yeah, I go down to the Mighty 8th Museum every year and sign copies of my book on Super Museum Sunday.
It's an amazing place.
It's a wonderful. In fact, I'm on the board of directors of the 306 Bomb Group Historical Association. My dad was in the 306 Bomb Group. I'm immediate past president. We're holding our annual reunion down in Savannah at the museum in November.
Wow, good for you. A lot of people don't know that the Air Force was originally the Army Air Corps and was spun off to become the United States Air Force. But what a lot of people, I just did our first golf outing fundraiser for Songs and Stories this past Sunday. And instead of having placards with Joe's Pizza and the local hardware store, we chose to allow them to name veterans that were important to them. People could send in a donation and we would make up a sign and we put them on the tees and the green. And I was surprised at the number of names that came in with the AAF, Army Air Force. And people say to me, what does that mean? And I told them it's the Army Air Force. But again, right next door to Fort Stewart, I'm sure you know, is an active duty Army Air Force base. And it's basically rotary wing helicopters is the Army Air Corps. Still around.
Oh yeah, it's not going anyplace. Yeah,
Right.
in the Army, they don't. They just have rotary aircraft. They don't have any fixed wing aircraft. They're all helicopters today.
Yeah. I thought that some of their scouts, their single engine scout planes were in the Army Air Corps, but maybe it is just helicopters. I do know that when we were there, you could not get on the base. It was totally different than Fort Stewart, which was wide open. The Army Air Corps base, I couldn't find an entrance anywhere. It had huge chain link fence and towers and dogs and everything else. And I guess it is a special operations base also. But a lot of retired military down in the Savannah area, and they're very proud of their bases that are there and the men and women who serve. So I've been there several times. It's a great experience, and it's a great place. And the 8th Air Force Museum is just amazing, and it's an example of the continuation of what you said earlier. When those young men and women went to war, when they came back from the war, they wanted to preserve their history and what they'd accomplished, and I think that's just amazing. I'm not sure that today's generation is interested in preserving anything of their past.
Yeah, when I go to air shows all around the country, signing copies of my book. I do a lot of speaking, and it always really the highlight of any air show is whenever a young man or girl, young boy or young girl wants to buy my book and wants to learn about World War II and the history of the 8th Air Force and the air war over Europe. So there's some of them out there. We just got to increase them.
And if we increase them, we'll increase their faith and belief in what we stand for as a country. I'm afraid we just have too many people who, as you're right, we haven't taught our history, and I don't know who said it, but those who do not know their past are bound to repeat it. And and we're clearly we're a divided country because I think we don't know what the country is. We don't know what it means any longer to be an American. We don't understand when people are allowed to come across the border without going through the process of immigration, and they come in and they don't assimilate into our culture. They want to maintain their culture from wherever they're from. We're ultimately diluting what made us great, and we're going to move more towards Europe. And it's very frustrating to me to see the lack of interest in history and where we came from as a nation, what we did as a country. We don't want to teach our children that, and we would rather teach them socialism or communism or whatever ism, not talk to them about where we came from.
Yep, we're on a very slippery slope.
Yeah. So do you do what else do you do besides writing and traveling and signing books? Anything?
Well, basically, that's a full-time job.
I would think so. I didn't know whether you did it on weekends or what was a full-time job.
Well, I have a second home in Sedona, Arizona. My main residence is in Seal Beach, California, about 40 miles south of Los Angeles. I live at Seal Beach. It's nicknamed Mayberry by the Sea. So we go back and forth. I love gardening. In Seal Beach, I basically have a botanical garden. I have over 75 species of palm trees growing in my yard.
Wow.
I spend a lot of time out working in the yard. And when we're in Sedona, we do a lot of hiking. So I keep very busy.
What did you do? What did you do before you started writing?
I was in sales and sales management for 40 years. The last 36 was for a company called Vision Service Plan, VSP. So basically, I'm doing pretty much the same thing I did there. I'm selling something, except selling something different. And I'm on that job. I traveled a lot all over the United States, and I'm doing that again now.
You said you have some young people that come up, want to buy your book and want to talk about it. Is that growing, or is it diminishing, or what's your sense of interest in the Second World War?
Well, most people who are interested have some connection with the war through a relative, whether it's their father or an uncle or a cousin or something like that. There are young people that are really interested in history, World War II history, but they're few and far between.
Why do you think we stopped teaching American history?
That's a question I can't answer. That I don't know. One point you made about there's what people say we're a country built on immigrants, which is true. But as you alluded to, back in years past, all the immigrants wanted to become Americans, wanted to assimilate, learn the language, become part of the country. And that's not what happens today. We're becoming fractured and segmented, and that causes a lot of strife and conflict.
And I think that is represented in the division of the country today. We have
Absolutely.
We have people who believe in the process of the law, and that there are rules for immigration, and there's things that you're supposed to do and assimilate into the culture and the society, learn the laws and grow and prosper. But there are people who don't want to do that anymore, who don't want to take the time to. I often wondered, and I thought about this so many times. What must a person think who goes through the legal process of getting into America, the 1 million+ people that immigrate legally to the United States? What must they think about those people who are coming through the southern border who did none of what they did? And how is that not dividing the country? I don't see how it helps the country. I see it dividing the country.
Well, the country's definitely divided. That's for sure.
Well, it is, and I know that they want to blame Mr. Trump, but I think the country was divided long before Mr. Trump came in, and the idea that we would allow sanctuary cities, that we would allow the diminishment of American citizenship, that we would spend hundreds of $billions of resources on people who should not have been able to come here. And what are we taking away from our rest of the people in our country by having these illegals continue to come across the border in vast numbers? And the Democrats don't think there's a problem. I don't understand that at all. That you could see these hundreds of thousands of people that are coming through a month, that come into our society, that bring nothing to the country. They take because they're poor educated and they don't have any money, and they come in and they want to continue their neighborhoods and where they came from. So they want to go away from where they came from, but they want to bring where they came from to the United States, as opposed to becoming true American citizens. It's to me a serious problem. And again, if we have people who do not have an affinity for the United States of America, it's going to continue to deteriorate. And it's basically sad. I mean, I wonder. That's why I'm on Jim's show and I write so much for so many different organizations, is trying to help people stop and think about, what's going on. And I can't. I'll be 74 in 2 months, and I was in the military in the mid to late 60s and early 70s, and so my first recollection of a real president was Dwight Eisenhower. And I honestly can't think, from a historical standpoint, I can't think of any president that has been treated the way this president has been treated by the opposition party in all the time that I've been following politics in the United States. And I think that sends a message to a lot of people.
You're absolutely right.
We've got Steve Snyder with us today. He joins us live here in our broadcast. He's an author, he's a speaker, World War II expert. Now, Steve, talk to us about your work with veterans, because Dan works with a lot of veterans with his organization. You speak at air shows, talk to veterans, work with veterans. Talk to us about your work, my friend.
Well, the 306 Bomb Group Historical Association, originally it was a veterans group. It was all made up of members of the 306 Bomb Group. But as time passes, there's fewer and fewer veterans. At the end of World War II, there were 60 million veterans. Today, there's about 3% of those great men that are still with us. We have veterans coming to our reunions, but now the organization has kind of morphed into a more historical group than a veterans group. We still have veterans that come to our reunions, and basically the mission of the association is to remember the air war over Europe, to honor the men who fought it, and to educate the public about it, especially trying to educate those younger generations. And I have the opportunity at these air shows I go to and other events I attend to meet World War II veterans and hear their stories, and to try to honor them. And but as what was mentioned, a lot of those men are in ill health now, and pretty soon we're going to lose them all a few years from now, and that's going to be a very sad day. And that's really the goal of my why I attend these air shows, and the goal of why I make presentations is just to keep the memory alive. It's our duty to remember.
So when you it's just I'm just trying to remember a number, and I'm drawing a blank. I know when I did the 8th Air Force tour, museum tour, I was amazed at the number of people that were involved in the 8th Air Force. And I don't want to misquote, but how big was that fighting force?
There were 350,000 men that served in the 8th Air Force. The vast majority of them were ground personnel and support personnel, trying to support the combat crews. 26,000 men in the 8th Air Force died during World War II. That's more than the entire Marine Corps fighting in the Pacific. Another 28,000 men became prisoners of war after their bombers were knocked out of the sky, either by German aircraft anti-aircraft fire or German fighter planes. Being a combat crewman in the 8th Air Force was the most hazardous duty assignment in the United States military during World War II. What they did day after day, going up on those bombers when any day could be their last, it took a lot of courage to do that.
So when you talk 350,000, how many actual pilots were involved in that 350,000?
Oh, I probably should know that off the top of my head, but I don't.
Okay. That's all right. That's all right. So do you ever sit down with people involved in what you're doing with the 8th Air Force and other things, and ever begin to have discussions about what's going to happen after we're gone?
Well, that's a big concern to all the veterans groups, whether it's the 8th Air Force Historical Society, the museum, all the different bomb group associations, because now all these organizations really, most of the membership are baby boomers, second generation. And it's a real challenge for us to try to get, the third and fourth generations involved and interested. And that's a real conundrum for us. And whether or not we're going to be able to continue these organizations, after the baby boomers, after we're all gone. It's a real challenge, and it's a real problem for us, and one that we haven't solved yet.
Are you attracting members of active duty members of the military today, and retirees, say, in the last 10 years? Are they joining your organization?
Some, but not to a great degree. No, they probably, I assume they have their own organizations which they belong to.
And are you working on another book?
No, I'm working on a documentary. I've gone over with some crews on 2 different occasions in 2016 and 2018 to do filming, have hours and hours of footage. So I'd like to put together a documentary about the book. We're working on that. Hopefully that'll come to fruition. Lots of people who read the book say it should be become a movie, but whether that ever happens, we'll see. It's easier said than done doing that.
Do you expect the documentary to be published?
That's the goal, to produce a documentary that has the quality to be able to present it to the History Channel or take it to film festivals or what have you. But that's still in the works. It's a lot of editing to be done, a lot of decisions on exactly how to do it, how much as far as talking about the book versus how I came to write the book, and so forth. So that's a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun filming over in mainly Belgium, but also the Netherlands and in Germany.
So, do you think you have enough footage for a documentary?
Oh, I have, yeah.
Too much.
Yeah. We have hours, and we might have 15 to 20 hours of footage, and you have to condense that into basically a 45-minute documentary, leaving enough time to have commercials that if it shows on TV, then you have an hour's program.
Mm.
But if it was ever made, it really is more suited to a miniseries than a movie, because I don't think you can really fit everything that's in the book into a 2-hour movie.
Yeah.
It needs to be a miniseries to follow, because you're following all these different members of a 10-man bomber crew. Hans Berger, the pilot, all the Belgian people that are trying to help him. And a number of the Belgian people that helped my dad and his crew were arrested and tortured, and some of them were killed. They were unbelievably brave people, because they risked their lives and those of their family and friends aiding down airmen. If the secret police, German secret police, the Gestapo found out about them, they'd be arrested, and tortured and either shot or sent to concentration camps. So they saved my dad's life.
So do you see this as a sequel to Bands of Brothers, only from the Air Force point of view?
Well, it could be. Actually, Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg are working on a 10-hour or 10-episode miniseries for HBO about the 8th Air Force. And
wow.
That, I don't know, I'm not sure when it might come out, maybe 2020. I doubt if it'll come out in 2019, but that's going to be the most expensive TV production in history. It's going to cost $500 million, and it's going to cost more than the Band of Brothers and the Pacific combined.
Wow.
So that should be a pretty fantastic miniseries.
I would guess. $500 million. Wow. Wow. So what's your schedule? Are you going somewhere for the Memorial Day weekend?
Yeah, last weekend I was actually in Virginia at the Military Aviation Museum for their Warbirds Over the Beach air show. On Memorial Day, I always go out to I have the T-shirt on here, Palm Springs Air Museum. They have a Memorial Day flower drop and airfare. And then on June 5th, I'll be in Belleville, Michigan, making a PowerPoint presentation at the Yankee Air Museum. And then the following weekend, on June 7th, 8th, and 9th, I'll be in Reading, Pennsylvania, signing copies of my book at the World War II weekend, which is a fantastic event.
Where is it? Where is that again?
That's in Reading, Pennsylvania.
Reading, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, about an hour and a half from Philadelphia.
Right. I know where it is.
They have a lot of warbirds that come and fly, and they have 3,000 World War II reenactors that come and put on battles and stuff. It's a fantastic event.
Wow.
So I do keep busy.
Sounds like it. Sounds like it. When you have a little bit of time for gardening.
And gardening, and then I spend hours every day on the internet promoting the book on social media and things like that. I'm a one-man show.
I can understand that. It's what I am too. I appreciate that. So when were you in Fort Knox?
It was January and February of 1970, and I'll never forget it because it was freezing cold. The wind chill was minus 25 below zero. It was snowing. Yeah, I was born and raised in Southern California. I don't like the cold, and I was freezing back there. I remember one time I looked out the barracks, and it was the first time I ever saw it snow. And I was like all googly-eyed, and these guys from Michigan and Minnesota and Ohio, they were just laughing at me.
How did a guy from Southern California get all the way to Fort Knox, Kentucky for basic?
I don't know. That's just where they sent me. But I went back there for AIT, Advanced Individual Training, in the spring, and then the weather was very nice, and it was very pleasant during AIT.
Yeah, I took my AIT there also. So interesting.
Yeah.
Have you read any other books, or do you have time to read other people and their accounts? Is there anything else that you really like, the way somebody's done their job?
Well, yeah, I've read a lot of books about World War II and the air war over Europe. This miniseries that I was telling you about the 8th Air Force that Spielberg and Hanks are making is based on a book called Masters of the Air by Donald Miller. That book's very wide in scope, unlike mine. It's about, lots of different bomb groups, lots of missions, lots of combat crews, whereas mine just follows one crew. But that's what that miniseries is going to be based on. My dad's actually in a couple books that were written about the air war. One is called The Mighty Eighth by Gerald Astor. That has my account of my dad's plane being shot down. That's about the 8th Air Force. The 8th Air Force got its was coined the Mighty Eighth by noted historian, 8th Air Force historian Roger Freeman, based on the number of planes that they could put up in the sky. There were hundreds of planes that went on these bombing missions, and on December 24th of 1944, there were 2,000 bombers that hit Berlin, which I can't even imagine. I get excited when I see one B-17 flying in the sky, but 2,000 bombers, B-17s and B-24s, hit Berlin. And it was the 8th Air Force flew their first mission on August 17th in 1942. And they were involved in high-altitude daylight precision bombing over occupied Europe and Germany, with a goal of hitting military and industrial targets to cripple Nazi Germany's ability to wage war. Then another book that my dad's story is in is called First Over Germany by, I'm having a blank here. It's about the 306 bomb group. It was written by Russell Strong, who was a navigator in this 306 bomb group and became his historian after the war. But there's lots of good books out there. Roger Freeman wrote a number of wonderful books about the 8th Air Force.
Okay. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Well, nice talking with you.
Yes. Now, Steve. But before we let you go, how do we get a hold of you online and pick up your books and everything else?
Okay. Well, most people buy the book on Amazon, and it's available as a hardcover, soft cover, available in all ebook formats such as Kindle. It's available as an audio book. Somebody wants to buy an autographed copy, they can go on my website, which is stevesnyderauthor.com. Snyder spelled S-N-Y-D-E-R, stevesnyderauthor.com. And if anyone wants to shoot me an email with a question or a comment, they can reach me at stevesnyderauthor.com.
Fantastic. Well, Dan, bring us up to speed on your nonprofit and your books and everything else, my friend, because I know you've got a heck of a lot going with Songs and Stories.
Yes, we just, as I said, we had a golf outing on Sunday, raised $11,000 to provide 1,000 MP3 players for veterans who are in the 7 Florida Department of Veterans Affairs Alzheimer's and dementia nursing homes, and we're thrilled to be able to do that. It's the largest project we've ever undertaken in terms of providing 1,000 players to one institution. We're in about 130 institutions now across the country, hospitals, service groups, homeless shelters, and we will have distributed about 19,000 of our MP3 players. Let me ask our guest, if I could, one quick question.
Yes, go ahead.
We have a website called Songs and Stories for Soldiers, and we give the veteran an MP3 player that has 2 books on it and audiobooks, and then an 8-hour custom designed sleep audio that allows them to get to, hopefully, to REM level sleep so they can begin the healing process. But we have a section called Something Special, and we feature authors. So maybe you could think about making your audio book available for veterans through our audio channel for Songs and Stories. Don't commit one way or the other day. Just think about it, and if you decide you want to do, you can get me through Songs and Stories for Soldiers.us. And books and everything are available at Amazon, and my major website is danperkins.guru. And as always, Jim, thanks for letting me talk to a wonderful guest.
Oh yeah, well, Dan, you've also got some books out there and some articles. What's some of your recent articles that people can go find?
If you go to danperkins.guru, you'll see an article that literally just came out on Monday, which is something that has created a spur of interest. I think probably more so than anything else I've written for a long time, and that is 10 questions I want to ask Robert Mueller. I'm so angry with the ineptness of the way the majority of our senators and congressmen ask questions to important people that I decided I was going to try and write an article about 10 questions that I want Robert Mueller to answer. And
that's awesome.
And I have a contact at the White House, which I sent that article suggesting they might pass it around just in case Mr. Mueller gets there. And I'm going to write 2 more after it. The 10 questions. And so what I said to people, if you like what you hear, but if there's something else that you want to ask a question, send me in the comment section what question you want to ask. And within the first 25, 30 minutes of the posting, I got like 20 responses of people who wanted to ask questions. So I promised the publisher that I would do 2 more. One are going to be 10 questions I want to ask James Comey. And then the third one, but may not be the last one, third is the question, is 10 questions I want to ask Hillary Clinton.
That would be fun. Well, Dan, I appreciate you making time for us today. This has definitely been everything I thought it would be and more. And Steve Snyder, I appreciate it, my friend. You are a fountain of information. Thank you, my friend.
My pleasure. Glad to be on the show. It was a lot of fun.
Definitely. Well, thank you guys, and both of you gentlemen, as well as the audience, have yourselves a happy Memorial Day. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. There goes Dan Perkins and Steve Snyder. And there we go. It is talk.